Okay, in this video, we're going to talk about levels, panning, and subtractive EQ. So this is quite a mouthful. It's a lot of stuff, and so we'll go over it in a very basic overview kind of way. Each one of these subjects could be a whole hours of videos all on its own, and some of that will happen, especially in the mixing workshop. But for this, let's just kind of give an overview of what some of these things are and what I'm talking about. We're going to start by looking at the 3D sound field and what that is. So what I'm going to start with here is just like a simple, just little software program here. I'm actually just going to kind of do an aerial view here and maybe just kind of adjust our angle a little bit here. Maybe I can do that. All right, so we could kind of see what's going on here. And so what I want to do is just kind of call up an individual thing that might be an instrument. So if we're standing over here behind our quote unquote mix desk or whatever this desk is, I actually have something here that I can move around, right? So this is, a whatever instrument, in this case, I have it listed as an acoustic guitar, right? And I can move it here. And when I'm mixing, I have the ability to move this speaker, left, right, and all the way around. Okay, and so that it gives me some different things. So let me actually kind of go back here, to the normal view, right, and kind of get back here. So what I wanted to get to here is that the sound can be moved in many ways, not just left, right, but also front, back. So as I'm moving my sound around, I can pan it left and right. And when I move it louder in level and gain, it comes closer to me or it goes farther away, right? So I have some ability to kind of move the sound around and make it, kind of function or work for me in whatever way that I need it to. Okay, so this is like this is just kind of a basic conceptual idea and called the 3D sound field. Now, in addition to working with the sound left, right, I also have the ability to move things up or down, right? So I can have sounds sound like they come from below the speakers or above the speakers, okay? And so now all of a sudden, by doing this, I have the ability to not only have things just left and right, and what happens with most people's mixes is they sound like they're all boxed in between the speakers. But by working with acoustics, an basic understanding of acoustics and how sound works and how our binaural hearing works, we have the ability to localize things not just in front of us, but off at a distance, up closer to us, not just left and right. And we also have up down. We actually have the ability to hear things from all directions. But because the sound is coming from a pair of speakers, we are limited in terms of where we can place those instruments because there's no way to make the sound source come from behind us unless we have a surround setup, right? Which is why they set up those types of things. So we can move our individual instruments around in different locations. Okay, and so this is great because when we're actually working, if we have to squeeze everything between this box between the speakers, then the sound ends up being very small, and that's what ends up happening with most people's mixes. Here, when I work with individual instruments, I can take them, and if I display them here, I should be able to select them. Oh, I see what I'm doing here. I'm actually selecting the wrong thing here, and so let's just see. Okay, great. So now I can bring up individual instruments, right? And so let's just say that that's our bass, okay? And let's see. Okay, okay, there we go, right? And then I can also have our vocal, right? And I can have the kick drum, right there, kind of sitting behind the bass, and my snare drum, and I could have guitars left and right, and looks like there's a Fender Rhodes there that I kind of clicked in by accident, and strings up high in the back, and acoustic guitars left and right, kind of panned like this, sort of in between, and a hi-hat track. So I have all of these different elements, and now if I go over here to my aerial view, we can kind of see that our instrumentation can be kind of moved around and placed all over the place, and not just right in front. So if our lead vocal is way up front here, and it's up high in the speakers, then the acoustic guitars there don't interfere with it, and the drums don't interfere with it because they're set back a little bit, right? And maybe that Fender Rhodes kind of sticks out a little bit more, right? So let me just kind of zoom back down here, right? And I get strings way off in the distance. And so I have the ability to move my sound around in the speakers in a variety of different ways, right? So I can actually take the sound and play with it in such a way that it expands or escapes the speakers, okay? And this is functionally how you want to approach mixing. So that's the concept of the 3D sound field. Now, achieving that is a whole different matter, right? And this is where we get into some of the basics of processing, okay? The first thing we're going to do is levels and panning. So the way that levels and panning work is that we're adjusting the overall balances of the mix. Remember I said that when we work with levels, that brings the sound closer to you when it's louder and more distant when it's lower in level. And that's pretty simple to understand. The panning moves signals left, right. So now there are many other factors that come in with the front back movement, okay, because the frequency response will have an effect on that. The amount of effects processing, like reverb, will also have an effect on the placement of that instrument and the wet-dry balance of the reverb. So these are things that kind of factor in. But let's just kind of take a quick look at what we do have here in a mix and just kind of work quickly and just kind of set some things up. So we got our basic mix here. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start by bringing all of my audio tracks down in level, okay? And I just like to do this, bring them down like 10 or 15 dB. And the basic idea here is that I just want to kind of start at a place where I'm not already overloading my mix bus because I have two faders up. Because if you have a lot of audio tracks the way they're recorded today, you may end up with things where the signals are almost peaking already just in the original recording. And so if everything is at zero, it's almost certainly going to overload your master bus and your stems if you have that kind of processing laid out. So let's start with some individual tracks here and see if we can kind of build it. So we'll start with the drums. Right, and so I'll set some basic levels here. Right, and I have a snare bottom. Add a little brightness there. Right, pan that guy a little bit over to the side. I got overheads. Okay, so there we go. So actually, my overheads are the other way, right? So I'm going to actually move this hi-hat track. Right, to be in the same location, and of course now that's where the that guy's not playing, right? All right, so I got a room track there, and let's bring in some bass. So what I'm really doing here is I'm kind of setting some basic balances, right? And what I'm trying to do is trying to find like what kind of works. Sometimes the snare being louder works better, right? Sometimes being lower works better. I may not need this bottom mic at all, right? Because there's so much of it and the overheads already. And in the room track. All right, so we'll kind of mix that in, right? And then we got some guitar. So you notice that I don't just, when I set a level on something, like I set the bass at a certain level, which sounded good with the naked drums, but when I mix in the guitars, I realize the guitars drive the track a little better. So, right, so I kind of balance them in a little bit more, just a touch more kick drum. Okay. And so here, you know, when I work here, I'm just going to go back to the beginning here and just kind of start over because there's some other tracks that we haven't gotten up yet here, which are. Okay, and so just kind of, oops, don't want to do that. Let's kind of start over again from the beginning so we can get that guitar. And
ties that bind you. Hold on to me. Live a life of loveless grace. Look at me, it's in my face. Hold on to me. Eli's coming, don't you worry. Everybody.
Okay, so as you can see here, our levels are very conservative here. We're pretty much okay. We're in a good place here. So, and this, as we get to processing and stuff like that, we got ourselves plenty of headroom, and it's very easy to kind of move up our overall gains if we need to. So we'll just kind of start there and work with these from some of the basics. And also, I'm just going to mute some of these effects processing. So if we add in some effects processing down the road here, we can just kind of leave that. For when we're ready for it, okay? And then, all of that will kind of take its own course. But in the interim, right, so what we're doing here is we're setting like the basic vibe for what the song is. What drives the track? Is it the guitars? Maybe there's a keyboard track in there that drives the track. Whatever it is, we're working with that and we're setting our basic panning scheme. So there's not a lot of instrumentation here, and it's all pretty self-contained, simple, right? Couple guitars, some drums, bass, and some vocals, right? So this is a simple mix. It gets more complicated as you start to add more instrumentation. And then you have to kind of be careful and figure out where instruments belong in the mix, right? So the levels and panning is really key because it's going to affect all the other levels of processing that you do, right? So we start with levels, we start with panning to get the basic layout, okay? So this front, back, left, right thing. But that's not everything, right? So as we kind of go through each level of processing, we want to start to open up and clear up the sounds as you're working. Okay, and that brings us kind of to our next stage here, right? Because when we actually start to work, what we want to do is I want to be able to set up and do some filtering, or subtractive EQ. And sometimes what I'll do here is I'll just set up like a simple EQ. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use a Waves just 2-band EQ just to kind of make this simple, so we're not really taking up a lot of processing power here. And so what we're really doing here is just setting this up. Oops, it kind of separates stereo and mono tracks, so I'll just kind of do that again and get our mono version of the same and get that laid out. So the idea here is what we're doing is we're going to filter off low frequencies and high frequencies, and we could do some subtractive EQ. So the basic next stage in the process here is to start to work with the individual tracks, right, and lay them out, right, so that when we start working here, so maybe what I'll do is I'll just kind of set this out here, create a little loop so that we can kind of get some continuous playback or continuous starting place when we need to. And I think I can move the beginning of that up to here, right where it begins. Okay, there we go. So the idea here is that, and I think I never set the tempo here. Well, that's actually kind of helpful. All right, so let me just, I think it's 93 beats per minute. Yeah, it probably looks, it looks a little bit more like it. Okay, great. All right, so so what we've done here is we've taken up and kind of set ourselves up where now what we can do is sort of what I call throwing out the trash, right? So what we really want to do is we want to get rid of stuff that doesn't belong here in the mix. And so what happens is, especially with acoustic recordings, right, where you have acoustic instruments, there's rumble, there's noise that's in there. And we kind of want to filter some of that stuff out without affecting what's going on with the individual tracks. Right? So in other words, if I start here with the kick drum, for example, I can actually do a low pass filter, right? This here, right? Or high pass filter rather, and that's way too high, right? You can, right? That kind of kicks everything away. But what I want to do is we don't really need a whole lot in terms of like sub frequencies, even on a kick drum, okay? Because it makes the speaker work too hard, right? And that's really unnecessary. I don't like to, personally, I don't really like to work with drums doing high frequency cutting, okay, in particular, because it needs kind of that height, and we'll kind of explain some of that in later videos. But what I can do here on the subtractive end is to kind of dip a little bit away of some like around 2, just to kind of tighten up the sound of the drum itself, right? So just kind of open it up a little bit. right? And now I can do the same thing here, right? So I can kind of work here and, all right, and so what I think I'm going to do here is I'm going to set up like, kind of copy this basic setting here so that I can just kind of paste it quickly into the other ones. Right, so I definitely don't want to affect the tone of the drum, right? So in other words, if I'm working with something, I don't want it to be so much audible, okay? In terms of the way that I'm working with the sound. Now here, depending upon what I'm using this for, right, the snare bottom, I may actually want to filter off the fundamental, right? Because it may actually sound better. Right, see that actually adds some low end, but it gives a little coloration here. So it may be better without it. Just leave this for the tone of the drum and then leave this for the brightness. Right, and that just might be one thing there. Right, and then so here with the hi-hat, I can do the same thing. So kind of clear my windows out here for a second. And so the idea then is that what I'm doing is I'm kind of taking away whatever little noise that's in there, and what that's going to do is it's going to make the other instrumentation work a little more clearly, right? So let me just kind of do this guy right here. That obviously is not the right one. Must have grabbed the wrong one there. So let's see. That's on the room track. Okay, we'll get to that in a little bit. How about I close these guys and just kind of get right to it that way. There we go. All right, so there's actually quite a lot of low in there, but it's kind of imbalanced in terms of the left-right here, and there's actually some kind of shifting that we're going to have to do there, but let's just see what it sounds like in the scheme of the whole drum kit. Right, so that adds some muddiness, right? So I can filter off some of that stuff, let the kick drum itself kind of occupy a little bit more of that low frequency, and let the the actual overhead mic carry kind of the brightness or overall presence of the kit, right? So, right, and then here what I have is right, all right, kind of working here back from the beginning. The beauty of looping. Okay, so here. Right, so this was probably going to require a little bit more work, right? Because I kind of got some, because it kind of has like a little bit of a strange tone in it here, and I can kind of maybe kind of help to open this up.
Loveless grace, look at me, it's in my face.
All right, so just doing that, and I got the bass here. We'll kind of work with that a little bit. And believe it or not, we can even apply this filter here to the bass, right? And we'll just kind of, we'll be down in the sub area, but generally you don't really need a lot because we don't hear very well down, below like 40 cycles or 35 cycles. So if you have an instrument that has stuff down there, of course you would want to keep it, but generally for this type of thing, it mostly creates problems, okay? And, you can listen and you may want to leave it just as it is and not have it in there, right? So we want to make sure that it's not affecting negatively what it is that we're doing, right? Same basic idea here, right? So I'm going to work with my guitars here, right? I'm just going to paste those settings in there and get those guys up. So you may say, well, what is this actually doing? Okay, And the quick way to do this is to listen, right? So let's just kind of take a look at if we just kind of take these things, and I don't have a way to just kind of bypass them all at once, but, right, so this is without them. Okay, so you can hear that. And now listen to how much it opens it up when I put them all in, right? Just filtering off those low frequencies. Right, and so there, of course, I get to another section. Right, so there's with it, right? So, and this without it. So what this does, if you listen, it just adds some clarity, particularly to the drums, to the kick and the bass. Right? And even here with the guitars, if I wanted to, I could kind of dip a little bit on the high end, right? And kind of get some high level stuff. And that's not unusual, right? Because a lot of that stuff is not really necessary in terms of the tone of the guitar, and can interfere with some of the other stuff that's going on.
Voices in your head, tell no lies, say the king is dead. Hold on to me. And put him in a box below, in a downtown train that's moving slow. Hold on to me. Eli's coming, don't you worry. Everybody feels the pain.
A little pea popping in there. Maybe have something to work with.
Eli's coming, don't you?
Okay, and so here I may want to just kind of take this and I can copy this over to here and copy that over to there. So now these settings should be identical to each other, right? So what I've done here is now I've kind of set up some basic filtering, right, with the instrumentation, right? And I could do the same here. I would do the same with the foot stomps and everything. So we just kind of go there.
Oh, can you free?
All right, so I'm going to solo up these foot stomps here. I have a feeling there's like some low mid stuff here that we can kind of dip out to kind of focus them a little more. Right, just to kind of open up the sound a little bit. So, there we go. There's going to be something in there. All right, one more time, and then we'll kind of work claps in here. So the idea is that we kind of work up till we start to hear the effect, right? Or where it starts to have a negative effect, and then back off a little bit, right? So that's the essential idea here. Right, so what we're doing is we're just kind of getting rid of stuff that's not necessary in the mix, right? And so if we had a weird tone on a particular instrument like the vocal or guitar, we could kind of dip a little bit like we do here. Mostly subtle type of stuff. If we see like a clipping, that might be because I'm, moving the EQ radically to kind of get some settings straight. But the basic idea here is by doing some of the subtractive EQ things, is that I'm clearing up or opening up the mix. So even though there's just this, maybe just this very subtle amount, it's important to kind of get rid of any kind of noise, if possibly can, including doing some editing on the tracks itself. Of those frequencies before you start to compress and apply other levels of processing, because once you start to compress, you're going to make that noise louder. So you want to make sure that you get rid of it first. And so what we're doing is by getting rid of these tiny little bits of noise times 15 tracks or 30 tracks or 50 tracks, however big your mix is, you actually create this cumulative effect of clarity, because that little bit adds up to a lot and makes it so that your mix is not distinct and clear. Okay, and this is like one very quick way to just start to open up the mix. And then when you do this, then you're going to readjust your settings here. So this may actually affect the balances of the instruments and make certain things stick out more. And so we'll make adjustments on the way, right? I didn't do this guy here, right? So this is our last one here on the train.
Oh, can you free your mind? Break the chains, the ties that bind you. Hold on to me. Live a life of loveless grace. Look at me, it's in my face. Hold on to.
Okay, so here, this one thing that is just it's bugging me. So I'm just gonna take it and okay, so that's okay. And I am just going to make an adjustment here. And this is just, this is kind of getting into imaging. There we go. All right. So let's just kind of get this. I think I should be able. No, actually, I don't want a binaural process. Okay. I think I'll just dig into my waves bundle here and go to something that I know, just like a simple. Alright, so just to kind of even out these guys, right? So essentially what we have is a little bit of an imbalance. Actually, kind of a... Okay, so this kind of centers them off a little bit more. I could actually do the balance control here. I like to do it kind of before the processing, and maybe even take this guy and kind of swap them around here so that the imager comes first, and then the EQ there, and that way we kind of get everything kind of working similarly. And that kind of helps to balance out the drums a little bit better. All right, so these are just subtle things that we kind of do as we go along, okay? And so this is the first step in the mixing process, levels, panning, and just subtractive EQ, right? Or kind of getting rid of the noisy stuff that's not really going to help us with our mix. Now everything else that we do on top of this is building off of a good solid foundation, okay? So this concludes this video on levels, panning, and subtractive EQ.